Hey guys, tonight we're heading way back to the banks of the Nile, where the air is dry, the sun is merciless, and the only toothpaste available involves, well, burnt eggshells and powdered rocks. You're barefoot, the sand's warm under your soles, and every breeze smells faintly of date palms and distant incense. In the haze of morning, sleepy villagers trudge to their daily routines, and among them, yep, you are reaching for a jar of what can only be described as ancient grit paste. You probably won't survive this, by the way. Not because of the toothpaste itself, though that is questionable, but because surviving ancient Egypt required everything from dodging hippos to figuring out what that crocodile wants. Spoiler, it's usually you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love knowing where this sleepy history crew is tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a clay walled house, tucked along a narrow, winding street of an Egyptian town not far from Thebes. The rooster doesn't crow. There are ibises for that. They squawk rudely from the rooftop as the morning sun pours into the courtyard. Your job today, keep your teeth clean, which in 1500 BCE is less about sparkly white smiles and more about staying alive one cracked molar at a time. A woman across the alley grinds something in a basalt mortar. You squint. It looks like ash, mixed with crushed seashell, maybe bone. The smell hits your nose like hot limestone and week old soup. Congratulations, that's your toothpaste. Dental hygiene isn't vanity here, it's deeply practical. The Egyptian diet flatbread, dried fruit, hard lentils, and beer thicker than oatmeal wears down teeth like sandpaper on driftwood. By age 30, most people's teeth are chipped, cracked, or gone altogether. You chew, you wince, you carry on. So it makes sense that this early culture took tooth care surprisingly seriously. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient dental tools from burial sites. These include bronze tweezers, thin chisels, and suspiciously tooth shaped scrapers. Not exactly electric toothbrushes, but still, these folks had a plan. Today, you've been given your very own hygiene kit: a small bowl of powder, a strip of linen, and a frayed twig. You kneel beside the water jar and dip the twig in. It softens. You wrap the linen tight around one end and dip it into the bowl. It's chalky. It's sharp. It tastes like someone tried to brush their teeth with sidewalk dust and lemon juice. That's the eggshell burnt to blackness and ground down to a fine powder. Historians believe this was one of the earliest abrasives used for dental cleaning. The gritty texture scours away food residue, the lemony taste. Likely myrrh or natron, both used for their antiseptic properties. You look up. A local boy is watching you. He grins with a mouth full of brownish stubs, gives a proud sea nod, and scampers away. Back in the village square, an elderly man sitting cross legged sells reeds soaked in mint oil. This, you realize, is the upgrade package, the luxury version of your basic grime paste. You hand over a barley cake and get one. You bite, wrong move. It's less like a breath mint and more like chewing on a freshly pruned tree. Historians still argue Whether these early practices were ritualistic medicinal or simply cultural habits picked up over time. Some scrolls mention hygiene alongside purification rites, bathing, shaving, cleaning the mouth before entering temples. Others mention it in spells to ward off mouth demons. Either way, whether you were a farmer or a high priest, nobody wanted to face Osiris with spinach in their teeth. By midday, the sun has risen to its full authority. You retreat to a shaded corner near the temple gate. A young apprentice with blue painted eyelids crushes another batch of tooth powder. His hands are stained with what looks like crushed charcoal, and could that be ostrich bone? Don't use crocodile dung, he warns flatly, without looking up. Smells worse than death. You don't ask how he knows that. The jars nearby are labeled with symbols, reeds, inks, and one that looks suspiciously like a molar. It's hard to say if these mixtures really worked. But in a land where most ailments were blamed on the gods, doing something, no matter how odd, was always better than doing nothing. And despite your skepticism, you realize something: your mouth feels cleaner. Sort of. If you ignore the scratchiness, the strange numbness, and the faint aftertaste of limestone. Maybe it's psychosomatic, maybe it's the mint, or maybe you've just taken your first gritty step into 3,000 years of dental history. Your next stop is the temple clinic, because in ancient Egypt, if anyone knew how to mix a decent paste or yank a sore tooth, it was probably a priest. Not the fire and brimstone type, mind you, but more of a robe wearing pharmacist with divine backup. You're ushered into a shaded chamber lined with jars, bowls, and reed scrolls. The air is thick with incense and a lingering aroma of dried herbs, copper, and lizard bile. A scribe in flowing linen leans over a scroll and motions for you to sit. Open, he says casually, as though he's about to examine your taxes. The examination tool, a bronze hook shaped like a tiny shepherd's crook, it gleams with regular use. He mutters a short prayer to Thoth, god of wisdom, and begins poking around your molars like he's searching for loose change. See, in Egypt, healing wasn't just medical, it was religious. Every ache, pain, and particularly rotten tooth was believed to have a spiritual cause: bad breath, probably a misaligned star, toothache, maybe a curse, or maybe you annoyed a crocodile spirit. It's unclear. The priest healer consults a papyrus beside him. It's covered in neat angled hieroglyphs. He traces a finger down a list of ingredients that to modern ears would sound like a potion from a fantasy novel: powdered myrrh, crushed carob pods, resin of frankincense, ashes of burnt ox hooves, and yes, boiled lizard bile. You probably grimace. He doesn't notice. He selects a tiny alabaster jar and removes the lid. Inside is a thick, dark paste. This one, he says, for mouth fire, a charming term for what we'd call gum inflammation. The treatment: dab the paste on a strip of linen and bite down for 20 minutes. Simple, slightly horrifying. While you wait, the priest tells you about a toothache that once afflicted a local governor. Apparently, his gums swelled to the size of a pomegranate. The healer used honey acacia sap and, oddly, a bit of copper scraped from a mirror. The swelling subsided after 3 days or so, the story goes. Historians still argue whether these mixtures had true antibacterial properties or if the copper was just a placebo with a nice metallic sheen. You try not to think about the copper as the lizard bile compress begins to burn slightly. Elsewhere in the room, another priest is mixing something dry and chalky. It smells better, like sage and lemon peel. You wander over and watch him pound what looks like powdered barley into a base of natron and milk. He adds mint. Your jaw drops. Mint, that rarest of treasures in the tooth care world. The equivalent of finding a tube of cinnamon swirl in a land of dirt and dust. He offers you a smear of it on a frayed twig. You chew experimentally. It's not awful, still gritty, but better. You wonder if this was reserved for the higher ups. There's no real answer, but based on the healer's raised eyebrow, you suspect you've just tasted the Pharaoh's brand. While you sit and chew, the priests chant quietly in the background. It's a haunting melodic hum that bounces softly off the sandstone walls. Between chants, they speak of dreams, not the modern kind, but dreams of crocodiles chasing them through fields, or of teeth falling like grain during the harvest. They believe these are signs, warnings from the gods. Maybe your sore tooth is a message, or maybe it's just that burnt eggshell recipe you've been using. A young apprentice brings over a scroll covered in anatomical drawings. It shows a jaw teeth exaggerated for emphasis, with tiny worms scribbled into the roots. Tooth demons, he says. We scare them away with chants. You nod politely, unsure whether to laugh or thank him. Fun fact, while they weren't correct about the worms, they weren't entirely wrong about bacteria either. Some of these herbal concoctions, particularly ones with salt, natron, or frankincense, may have had genuine antimicrobial effects. The priests didn't know that, of course, but credit where it's due. The priest returns to check your mouth. He nods solemnly. You'll live. High praise. As you step back into the daylight, you pass a painted wall that shows a scene of healing. A figure bows before a god offering what seems to be a toothbrush, okay, more like a twig, and a jar. The god accepts it, smiling. You feel better. Maybe it's the mint. Maybe it's the lizard bile. Maybe it's the placebo effect of thousands of years of belief. Whatever it is, you're ready for the next ritual in this ancient hygiene saga. You wake up the next morning with a peculiar sensation. Your teeth feel smoother. Not clean exactly. There's still a lingering aftertaste of yesterday's lizard bile cocktail, but less fuzzy. That counts as progress in 1500 BCE. Today's task, a proper morning routine, Egyptian style. You shuffle into the courtyard, where the air is already warm and slightly dusty, the sun edging over the mud brick rooftops like a sleepy cat. An older neighbor, a woman with deep laugh lines and an authoritative scowl, waves you over to a basin. She's stirring something thick and powdery with a reed. Paste, she says. Grit's fresh. That's not as reassuring as she thinks it is. She hands you a pestle, points to a mix of ingredients in small clay bowls, and nods. Time to DIY your morning scrub. You lean over the ingredients: burnt eggshells for abrasion, crushed pumice, also for abrasion, dried iris petals, maybe for smell, a bit of powdered ox hooves. You try not to dwell on that and surprise ashes from yesterday's fire. You pound the mix into something resembling ancient sidewalk salt, then slowly stir in a drop of water, a hint of honey, and if you're lucky, a single mint leaf. The smell is earthy, with a suspicious whiff of campfire. The consistency like gritty hummus. It's worth pausing to marvel at how dedicated these folks were. They didn't just wing it. Recipes for this kind of paste show up on papyri carefully documented. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts we've found, lists multiple dental treatments. Some involve honey and dates. Others call for obscure things like malachite powder or crushed barley husks soaked in beer. Historians still argue whether the effectiveness of these recipes lay in their ingredients or the ritual of their preparation. Your neighbor watches as you apply the paste to a frayed twig, your trusty chew stick. Egyptians didn't have bristled brushes, but they had the next best thing, twigs from the Salvadora persica tree, aka the toothbrush tree, or more commonly, whatever was growing nearby. They'd fray one end by chewing or pounding, creating a brush like tip. You mimic the motions you've seen gentle scrubbing up and down, careful not to gag on the taste. A bit of grit lodges in your molar. Classic. But despite the occasional crunch, the method works. You're polishing your teeth with what is essentially the ancient world's best available technology. Nearby, a boy splashes water over his own chew stick and hums a tune. He's got a little pot of natron paste, likely made by his mother that morning. You point to it. He shrugs. Fishbone and date ash, he says. Good for smell. You're not sure if he means good to get rid of smell or if it adds a smell. Either way, you nod respectfully. By now, your mouth is tingling. Whether that's mint or micro scratches is unclear, but the process has something meditative about it. The rhythm of brushing the warmth of the sun, the murmurs of neighbors tending their own routines. It's soothing. You glance around. People from all walks of life are doing the same thing. Workers prepping to haul stones, merchants arranging produce, women weaving mats. Everyone pauses, at least briefly, to tend to their teeth. It's easy to imagine this as just another part of daily ritual, like offering incense or reciting a morning prayer. And while it's tempting to romanticize, it's also true that ancient Egyptians had serious dental issues. Their bread was full of sand from the grinding stones, which wore teeth down to nubs. Microscopic analysis of mummies shows severe tooth abrasion abscesses and exposed pulp. Some skulls reveal jaws so riddled with infection, it's a miracle their owners could smile at all. That grit filled bread was tasty, but it came at a cost. You rinse with a bit of lukewarm water from a clay jug and spit it discreetly behind a bush. Even that has its rituals. You're not supposed to rinse in public. Spitting was a bit taboo, but everyone does it anyway, usually facing east, toward the rising sun. Tradition, maybe. Habit, definitely. One of the elders jokes that the gods can tell who brushed their teeth based on how shiny their bones are in the afterlife. You're not sure that's canon, but hey, it gets a laugh. By mid morning, your mouth feels oddly invigorated. You've got grit between your gums, a mild burning sensation under your tongue, and the distinct awareness that you've just scrubbed your face with something more abrasive than sandpaper. And yet you feel good, or at least not dead, which for ancient Egypt is a win. Back in the village square, a group of healers are debating technique. One insists the best approach is diagonal strokes with a damp linen. Another swears by circular motions with the twig. A third older man shakes his head. If you don't chant to Isis while brushing, he says solemnly, you're just wasting paste. They all nod as if that settles it. You duck under a palm thatched awning as the noon sun hits full throttle, seeking shade and a bit of relief from the mouth tingling residue of your latest brushing adventure. Just as you're about to settle into a nap beside a sleepy goat, a temple apprentice scurries past you, clutching a rolled up scroll and muttering about fire teeth and copper mix. Your ears perk up. You follow. Inside a cool chamber lined with limestone shelves, you find a quiet bustle of healers and scribes gathered around a large papyrus laid flat on a wooden table. The room smells strongly of myrrh, beeswax, and for some reason roasted garlic. The scroll, it's one of the oldest medical guides in the ancient world, the Eber's Papyrus. You lean closer. The drawings are delicate, the hieroglyphs tight and slanted, etched with meticulous reverence. One scribe runs his finger along a passage and whispers the translation. If the mouth burns, take honey, copper shavings, and warm beer. Mix with ash from fig wood. You blink. That sounds less like a cure and more like a challenge from a cooking show with very questionable judges. Still, this particular recipe was meant to treat a condition called mouth heat, which scholars today suspect may have been a catch all for ulcers, inflammation, or even basic gum infection. The honey acts as an antimicrobial agent. The copper well, let's be honest, they had theories, and the warm beer, possibly to make you feel better about the rest of it. Historians still argue whether these remedies were invented through observation or trial and very painful error. Some argue a few were sheer chance. Someone dropped a hot coal into a jug of beer, mixed it with resin, and went, hey, this doesn't hurt anymore. Another apprentice offers you a sample from a small alabaster pot. Copper and barley ash, he says proudly, like he's just won an award. You dab a tiny amount onto your gums. It fizzes. You're not sure if that's a good thing. Nearby, two elderly women chant softly while pounding something into a powder using a stone pestle. They're preparing a treatment for tooth shadows, a poetic term for aching molars that cast a pain across the jaw. Their concoction includes cinnamon bark, dried lotus root, and the ashes of a burnt feather. You don't ask what kind. The line between medicine and magic is thin here. Most recipes are paired with incantations, and each ailment has a spiritual dimension. You hear one healer mutter a prayer to Sekhmet, the lion headed goddess of destruction and healing depending on her mood. She's a bit like a cosmic dentist with no scheduled hours. In the corner of the room, a clay tablet bears a faint image of a man grimacing, a large tooth drawn exaggeratedly beside him. Above it is a tiny drawing of what looks like a snake wriggling into the mouth. Toothworms again. The belief that tiny creatures burrowed into your gums to cause pain was surprisingly widespread and persisted across multiple cultures for centuries. Even some 18th century Europeans still blamed cavities on worms long after toothbrushes became common. As you listen to the rhythmic grinding of herbs and the gentle rustle of papyrus, it dawns on you these treatments, bizarre as they seem, represent thousands of years of trial, error, and storytelling. A communal science passed down by healers, parents, and scribes who never stopped trying to make life slightly less painful. You take a seat by the wall where a soft breeze slips in through a high window. A younger apprentice comes by and, with surprising care, rubs a smear of clove scented paste along your gum line. This one, she says, from a Nubian recipe, smells nicer than the copper. She's right. It's warming, almost sweet. The kind of thing you'd want in a candle if candles were a thing. And while copper and honey seem like odd companions, modern scientists have found that trace metals can have mild antimicrobial properties. Did the ancient Egyptians know this? Probably not. But they did know that these ingredients worked, or at least seemed to, and that was enough to earn them a place in the sacred scrolls of temple clinics. You lean back and close your eyes. The apprentice hums softly while organizing jars labeled with symbols for freshness, bite, and breath. Everything here is slow, deliberate. No rush, no Novocaine, just chance, chalk, and a pinch of divine hope. As the temple gong sounds somewhere in the distance, signaling the changing of the hour, your gums feel slightly less tender. You don't know if it's the copper, the honey, or the prayer to Sekhmet, but it's working, or at least it feels like it is. And in this place, feeling better is often the most important part of healing. Your feet are dusty from temple floors and courtyard stones as you find yourself drawn almost ceremonially to the edge of something bigger, something more gold laced, perfumed, and intimidating than the humble village huts you've grown used to. Today you're headed to the palace because it turns out that no matter how grand your sandals or how shiny your headdress toothaches don't care who you are. Even the mighty pharaoh child of the sun god Ra has molars, and sometimes they ache. You're ushered through tall gates into a complex shaded by palms and lined with lotus ponds where the air smells of incense and imported oils. The floor is polished alabaster, smooth enough that your toes slide a little as you walk. A court attendant, impossibly tall and impossibly serene, guides you through a colonnade where walls are covered in scenes of victorious battles, lavish banquets, and in one curious corner, what appears to be a royal figure clutching his jaw in agony while priests offer him a bowl. Apparently, dental suffering is timeless. You're brought to a chamber lit by oil lamps and perfumed with sandalwood. Reclining on a raised couch is a nobleman, likely a royal advisor or distant cousin to the pharaoh himself, swaddled in linens and scowling as though someone's just fed him week old goose. I haven't eaten in 2 days, he mutters. The pain shoots into my ears. The healer by his side, a high ranking temple dentist of sorts, nods sagely. He examines the advisor's mouth with a bronze probe, then dips a linen swab into a thick greenish salve. The mixture contains goose fat, myrrh resin, crushed malachite, and what looks like coriander. This one, he explains to no one in particular, coats the roots and draws out the fire. He applies the mixture and instructs the nobleman not to eat or speak for an hour. A truly royal tragedy. You're offered a peek at the royal oral hygiene kit laid out on a carved table nearby. It gleams, literally. Gold plated tools, spoons, tweezers, spatulas, and an ivory handled chew stick resting on a folded cloth. There's even a small container of what appears to be scented powder, possibly crushed rose petals mixed with chalk. This is Toothpaste Deluxe Edition. Historians speculate that the wealthy elites had access to significantly better ingredients. While your average laborer scrubbed with sand and wood ash, the elite brushed with imported resins, fragrant oils, and sometimes even rare tree barks brought in from the Levant. But money didn't buy good enamel. You examine a preserved mummy skull later in the palace archive room. Despite its gilded sarcophagus and bejeweled wrappings, its teeth are worn almost to the gum line, scraped down by years of sandy bread and unrelenting grit. Rich or poor, you still ate the same flour, still drank the same gritty beer. The palace physician gestures you over to a low table covered in scrolls. One scroll is a chart of the mouth, each tooth named and numbered, though not quite as we'd recognize. Incisors are called biters, molars, grinders, and wisdom teeth, cursed pearls. He points to a passage that suggests toothaches could be alleviated by whispering a prayer to Hathor while applying warmed goose grease. Another recommends holding an amulet carved with the symbol for eternal breath between the lips for 10 minutes. Symbolism is essential, he says solemnly, before dropping the amulet into a pouch of dried mint and camel hair. The pharaoh, we're told, had his own special rinse date, wine strained through linen and mixed with powdered pearls. You raise an eyebrow. Was it effective, you ask? The healer shrugs. It was royal. Even the concept of brushing was ceremonial here. Attendants likely assisted the pharaoh or his consorts in daily grooming, including tooth cleaning, with rituals tied to purity and rebirth. A fresh mouth meant favor with the gods, especially in the afterlife, where foul breath could supposedly offend the very deities guarding your soul's journey. Historians still argue whether these grooming routines were truly daily or reserved for holy days. But it's clear that tooth care was not just bodily, it was sacred. Just as the heart was weighed against a feather, a clean body was seen as worthy to enter the field of reeds. As you wander the palace grounds past gardens and mosaic tiled pools, you notice small dishes placed along the walkways. Each holds dried herbs, mint, or cinnamon bark. Offerings, perhaps, or maybe just ancient potpourri. You inhale. It smells faintly of someone trying to cover up the fact that they ate 3 onions for lunch. Because here's another fun reality: many Egyptians had awful breath, the love of onion heavy diets. The beer rich in yeast and sediment, the days without water. No amount of burnt eggshells was going to totally fix that. Still, the effort was made. Gold tools, perfumed rinses, sacred chants. Even royal smiles had to sparkle, at least in the murals. As you exit the palace, a scribe chuckles softly and says even Ra's children get cavities. And just like that, you feel a little less alone in your gritty eggshell toothpaste life. Later that day, you're handed what looks like a plain, knobby twig. At first, you think it's kindling, or maybe something a goat chewed and spit out. But no, this is your new dental tool. The chew stick. Egyptians loved them. In fact, the humble chew stick predates the toothbrush by millennia. It's low tech, biodegradable, and surprisingly effective when used correctly, which you're about to learn through firsthand experience. Lucky you. You sit cross legged near a merchant stall selling dried herbs and fish jerky while a young boy beside you demonstrates. He chews the end of his stick until it frays, then gently runs it along his teeth, up and down, side to side, humming quietly all the while. Like painting the wall, he explains. But inside your mouth, his twig, it turns out, is from the Salvadora persica tree, the so called toothbrush tree. It's prized for its natural antibacterial properties and mild peppery flavor. Yours, unfortunately, is from the random stick from the side of the road tree. Still, you do your best. As you chew, the fibers separate, forming a small brush head. It doesn't taste terrible, slightly bitter, woody, like licking an old spice rack. It doesn't foam, of course, but there's a faint freshness, especially if you dip it into one of the many powdered pastes people keep in little jars tucked into their belts. You're offered a blend that smells like crushed celery and burnt cinnamon. My mother's recipe says the woman offering it. Good for bad breath and curses. Naturally, you notice that almost everyone has a chew stick tucked behind an ear or in their belt like a functional fashion accessory. Fishermen use them between boat repairs. Bricklayers scrub after meals. Even children gnaw on mini versions, learning the habit early. It's part hygiene, part ritual, part fidget toy. Some even believe chew sticks could ward off evil spirits that enter through the mouth. You can't confirm their spiritual power, but you can one confirm they make you feel just a little less like your teeth are coated in sandpaper. As you keep brushing, a traveling apothecary strolls by with a basket full of bundled twigs. He offers several varieties, mint soaked, cinnamon infused, even one rubbed with dried rose petals. You pick one that smells like clove and lemon. Instant upgrade. He explains between sales pitches that the best chew sticks are harvested fresh and dried just long enough to avoid mold. You nod, chewing thoughtfully. Your new stick has a pleasant burn, like very gentle mouthwash if mouthwash came in twig form. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of chew sticks in Egypt was learned from nearby Nubian or Mesopotamian traditions, or whether it was simply a case of parallel innovation. After all, what do you do when your teeth are falling out and you don't have a toothbrush? You chew on something and hope it helps. The good news, it usually did. Chew sticks worked. Studies of ancient dental remains show that while Egyptians suffered from wear and tear plaque buildup was often minimal, likely due to the abrasive and antimicrobial properties of these humble tools. You spend the afternoon rotating through sticks and pastes, comparing textures and flavors. Some are chalky and dry, others sticky with resin. One particularly suspicious one smells like fermented onion. You pass. Later, a man selling wine soaked willow twigs insists they relieve tooth sadness, which you assume means pain. He winks, or heartbreak, depends where it hurts more. You test the willow twig, which numbs your gums slightly. Willow bark, you recall, contains salicin, an ancient precursor to aspirin. Somehow these people figured that out without needing a lab. Trial and error, divine inspiration, or sheer desperation, you're not sure. By sunset, You're sitting at the edge of the Nile, watching the water shimmer under an orange sky. You're chewing a cinnamon twig, gently brushing the day away. It's become second nature. There's a soft rhythm to it. Press, rotate, rinse. Press, rotate, rinse. It's oddly meditative, soothing. The sun dips lower, and you imagine ancient Egyptians doing this very same thing day after day, year after year, century after century. Same sticks, same river, same stubborn teeth. You spit quietly into the reeds and smile. Your teeth may still be a little gritty, but somehow they feel clean. By the following morning, you're practically a seasoned tooth scrubber, chew stick chewer, and paste connoisseur. Naturally, it's time to level up. Your host, a wiry, sun browned man with hands like leather and a voice that sounds like he's been gargling desert wind, waves you over to the workyard. Today, he says with a grin, you make the paste. He gestures toward a low stone bench stacked with bowls, bundles of dried herbs, and two large mortars carved from basalt. You gulp. There's no neat little squeeze tube here. This is toothpaste manufacturing, ancient Egyptian edition, equal parts science guesswork and mild superstition. Step 1. Crush everything. First up, burnt eggshells. The shells have been blackened in yesterday's cooking fire until they're brittle enough to crumble between your fingers. You toss them into the mortar and begin pounding with the heavy stone pestle. Dust rises into the air, smelling faintly of campfire and breakfast regrets. Next, pumice stone, ground to a fine powder. Pumice volcanic in origin is one of the oldest natural abrasives known to humanity. Egyptians imported it in chunks, then crushed it for use in everything from exfoliating the skin to scrubbing teeth. It's rough, it's scratchy, it definitely gets the job done. Then comes the natron, a salty, mineral rich compound collected from dry lake beds. Natron is one of the unsung heroes of Egyptian daily life. It's used in embalming, yes, but also in cooking, soap making, and of course, oral care. Its antiseptic properties help preserve clean, and if you're lucky, brighten that weary smile. You pound, stir, and mash until your arms ache, and the bowl holds a pale gray powder. Now, says your mentor, choose the flavor. He gestures to an array of add ins, myrrh, resinous, and bitter mint leaves if you're lucky enough to afford them, dried cinnamon bark, crushed coriander seed, and even brace yourself sun dried crocodile dung. Yes, you heard that right. Apparently, some early dental remedies included crocodile dung for its mystical properties. Something about its protective aura. You stare at it greenish and chalky and politely pass. Suit yourself. The man shrugs, keeps the tooth demons away. You opt for myrrh and mint. Classic, safe, smells vaguely like a cough drop. Into the mix it goes. The final step. Moisture, just a few drops. Not too much or it turns to soup. Water, honey, or a touch of beer. Yes, beer. Not the fizzy kind you're used to, but the thick porridge like beer Egyptians brewed from barley. Turns out it works well to bind powder into paste. You settle on honey and warm water. The result? A paste that smells like a smoky herb garden and looks like gray hummus. You smear a bit on your chew stick and give it a go. Crunchy, gritty, surprisingly minty. You've tasted worse, and you're not alone. Across the workyard, others are crafting their own blends. One man prefers a bit of salt and fennel for spice. A young girl stirs hers with rose petals and date syrup. Everyone's got a recipe passed down from their grandmother or lifted from a temple scroll. Historians still argue whether there were standard formulas for dental paste, or if each region, even each household, had their own. Some ancient medical papyri suggest a more ritualized approach, specific herbs for specific ailments. Others read more like family cookbooks, a dash of this, a pinch of that, always ending in a good rinse. You're shown a small clay jar, etched with a symbol resembling a tooth and a line of script for the biting mouth of the son of Heru, a label, a warning, perhaps both. It contains a reddish paste with cinnamon and red ochre, likely an offering or a high end concoction used only on special days. In the back of the yard, a few jars are drying in the sun. Paste once made could be stored in these clay pots and left to harden slightly. Before use, you'd scrape a chunk out, add water or honey, and give it a good stir. Think of it as the ancient version of squeezing from the middle of the tube, controversial but effective. You decide to prepare a few jars of your own, one with mint and honey, one with cinnamon and salt, one mystery blend you toss together from whatever's left. It smells ambitious. You label it with a crude drawing of a sad tooth and stash it in a cool corner. Before you leave your mentor hands, you a pouch filled with crushed natron dried mint and a pinch of powdered pumice. For travel, he says. Rub it on your gums if you miss your paste. The pouch smells like effort and slight regret, but it's yours. As the sun sets, you look down at your hands, dusted white with powder, and realize you've officially contributed to the 3,000-year-long history of homemade dental care. Grit and all, evening has settled over the village in a haze of flickering oil lamps and quiet conversations drifting from courtyard to courtyard. But tonight things are livelier than usual. There's a festival underway not for harvest or war or some distant deity, but for the scent of the gods. You've wandered into the Festival of Breath, a local celebration rumored to be both spiritual and hygienic. People gather near the temple, clutching bundles of herbs, bowls of scented paste, and little jars filled with all manner of rinses. You're not sure if this is a party or a group rinse and spit. Turns out it's a bit of both. A priest begins the ceremony with a chant that vibrates in your chest more than your ears. Incense curls skyward from brass burners. The smell thick and heavy, frankincense, myrrh, and something like spicy celery. You try not to sneeze. As the crowd hushes, people begin their breath rituals. Some chew on cinnamon bark, others swirl herbal rinses in their mouths like ancient sommeliers. One man snorts with laughter after trying a particularly fiery ginger mix. His eyes water. You're tempted to ask if that's part of the cleansing process. Nearby, a woman offers you a cup filled with a cool, cloudy liquid. It smells of mint, crushed fennel, and date wine. For breath sweet as lotus, she says. You sip. It's intense. Imagine mouthwash herbal tea and wine had a mildly chaotic child. Still, it leaves your tongue tingling in a not unpleasant way. You watch as people anoint their gums with perfumed oils dab their temples with resin, and gently hum mantras. The festival may be partly for fun, but there's deep belief here too. Breath was thought to carry life force. Clean breath meant clarity, divine connection, a purified self both physically and spiritually. Egyptians often associated breath with the soul ka, and it was said that bad breath could disturb harmony. In burial rituals, special attention was given to the mouth. Even in death, a pleasant breath meant a smoother journey through the afterlife. Historians still argue whether these breath rituals were truly widespread or more common among the elite. The evidence is scattered ritual bowls, inscriptions referencing breath offerings, and elaborate perfume cones worn during festivals to mask, among other things, the smell of the crowd. As part of the ceremony, a man steps forward holding what looks like a large reed flute. Instead of music, it sprays a fine mist scented with lotus and sandalwood. People lean in eyes closed, letting it fall across their faces. You follow suit, and for a moment, the world smells like a blooming garden beside a temple bathhouse. Then comes the shared rinse. A bowl is passed around, filled with warm water, infused with mint rose petals and natron. Everyone takes a small sip, swishes, and spits discreetly into their own jar. You do the same, trying not to think about how communal this is. But there's a lovely kind of camaraderie to it, like everyone here is sharing in the same hopeful breath, a moment of quiet, mint scented togetherness. A storyteller begins reciting tales of gods with divine breath, how Horus could calm storms with a sigh, or how Hathor's laughter smelled of wildflowers. Children giggle, adults smile. Someone passes you a strip of linen soaked in clove oil, and you dab your lips, feeling oddly dignified. Later, a group performs a comedic skit about a merchant with garlic breath, so strong it caused cats to faint. The audience roars with laughter. One of the actors waves around a pouch of natron like it's a magic talisman. It's all silly, joyful, oddly heartwarming. You slip away for a moment, walking toward the river's edge, where the breeze is cooler and the night quieter. Even here, you catch whiffs of mint incense and someone's experimental breath rinse that smells suspiciously like burnt celery. You breathe in deep. Your mouth feels fresh. Your lungs feel light. For once, you're not tasting grit or ash, just a little hint of fennel and honey on your tongue. The stars blink above the Nile, and you imagine generations before you, thousands of years of Egyptians, standing just where you are swishing strange concoctions and hoping to impress both neighbors and gods with their divine smelling exhalations. You smile, not just because your breath might actually be decent for once, but because somehow in this strange blend of ritual hygiene and community, you feel oddly clean. The next morning starts innocently enough with birdsong, the rustle of linen, and a faint craving for lentil porridge. But it doesn't take long for things to take a turn. You're sitting in the courtyard, gently brushing your teeth with your now favorite cinnamon chew stick when a neighbor leans over and mutters, "You know it's worms, right?" You pause. Worms. She nods seriously. Inside your teeth. That's why they ache. They squirm around in there. Welcome to the ancient theory of toothworms. Yes, worms. Tiny invisible creatures believed to wiggle their way into your molars and cause all your dental misery. You resist the urge to drop your chew stick and scream. To be fair, it wasn't just the Egyptians. Cultures from Sumer to China once believed in these mischievous little parasites. The symptoms made sense to them: a throbbing ache. That must be a worm dancing in your jaw. A foul smell, clearly the worm is dying, or worse, laying eggs. Historians still debate where the theory started. Some say it emerged from early agricultural metaphors. Crops had worms, so why not teeth? Others suggest it was a way of explaining an unseen pain in a world without microscopes or germ theory. The temple healers weren't immune to this belief either. Later that day, you're invited to a small demonstration in the scribe's courtyard. A young apprentice holding a carved wooden mouth model explains how to coax the worm out. The method involves smoking out the tooth with a blend of burning herbs, garlic, and resin, then praying to Hathor while applying the warm compress of onion and clay. You watch as a volunteer steps forward, reclines, and winces while smoke curls toward his open mouth. If the worm leaves, the apprentice explains he'll smell it and flee. You glance sideways at the priest, muttering incantations, and wonder if this is dental care or competitive exorcism. Meanwhile, other remedies abound. One woman swears by biting a clove soaked in vinegar. It paralyzes the worm, she says, eyes wide. Then you spit him out. You try it later, and while it does burn impressively, no visible worm escapes. Disappointing, but also comforting. Another method: tapping the affected tooth with a bronze pick while chanting "Worm, worm, fly to the sky." You're not sure if the rhyme is official doctrine, but it's catchy. Some scribes even recorded detailed illustrations of these alleged invaders, tiny curled creatures drawn alongside molars, usually labeled with words like devourer or root thief. You can't help but admire the creativity. And while modern dentistry would laugh this off, it's oddly poetic. Pain was personalized. The worm became a villain to battle a presence, to appease a story to pass on. Pain without a name is terrifying. A worm. You can do something about that. You can smoke it, pray it out, clove it to death. Still, a few more progressive healers seem skeptical. One older priest mutters, "If there are worms, why don't we find them in skulls?" He's quickly shushed. No one likes a skeptic at a toothworm party. Later that evening, you watch two friends debating their own symptoms. One claims her tooth aches only at night, proof the worm is nocturnal. The other says hers flares up after hot beer, meaning the worm dislikes heat. They compare notes like seasoned zoologists. You nod along, swirling a rinse of mint and natron just in case. Before bed, you light a small incense cone beside your sleeping mat, clove myrrh, and a pinch of garlic ash. It's said to ward off tooth demons, or worms, or nightmares. The lines blur after a while, and as you drift off, tongue pressed to a molar that feels just a bit too warm, you can't help but picture a tiny worm in a tiny chair throwing a tantrum in your jaw. You'll smoke him out tomorrow, maybe. You're woken by the clanging of bronze tools, sharp and rhythmic, like a blacksmith doing dentistry. Turns out that's exactly what's happening. Today you're observing a real treat or a horror show, depending on your comfort level with ancient oral surgery. A tooth extraction, no anesthetic, no numbing gel, Just some incense, a prayer, and the unflinching grip of a healer's assistant. The patient is a merchant in his 40s, pale with discomfort, lips pressed into a determined line. He's reclined on a linen covered bench in the courtyard of a temple clinic, clutching a woven reed mat like it might save him. His problem, a molar that's split right down the center, probably thanks to years of sand laced bread and chewy dates. The pain, he says, is like being bitten from the inside. The healer nods, dips his fingers into perfumed oil, and instructs the man to rinse with warm beer steeped in coriander and thyme. The idea, it seems, is to relax the mouth and the nerves. You're seated nearby, invited to observe but keep silent. You do your best, mostly. The healer's tools are laid out with precision: bronze picks, scrapers, and a set of tongs that resemble tiny salad servers forged in the fires of patient misery. There's no modern sterilization, of course, just a jar of natron and incense smoke, which is believed to purify both tools and air. Historians still argue whether Egyptian extractions were common practice or last resort desperation. Some skulls show healed sockets suggesting teeth were removed. Others show signs of serious decay left untreated. It's possible only wealthier citizens could afford this kind of agony and style. The healer murmurs a prayer to Sekhmet goddess of both healing and destruction fitting. His assistant holds the patient's shoulders. A second helper brings a bowl of cool water and clean linen. You brace yourself. The tongs slide into the mouth, clink softly against the damaged molar, and clamp. The healer gives a quick, practiced tug. The merchant grunts. A second pull, this time a crunch, then a wet pop. Out it comes, reddened, cracked root, jagged and ancient. He doesn't scream. He just exhales long and slow and sinks back into the bench like someone who's wrestled a lion and lived. You can't look away. The tooth is dropped into a dish of vinegar and crushed salt. Some believe keeping the tooth prevents spirits from returning through the gap. Others insist you must toss it into the Nile or risk it turning into a curse. Tooth disposal is a whole philosophical category in this culture. A strip of linen soaked in resin and honey is packed into the empty socket. The healer chants softly while applying pressure. Then he steps back, hands trembling slightly, and sighs. It's done. You speak to him afterward. He shows you a scroll, ancient, smudged, and brittle, detailing instructions for treating a broken tooth with pain that reaches the ear. It recommends binding with red clay and chanting the name of Horus until the wind leaves the mouth. You try not to laugh. It's serious business here. In another room, a young apprentice is boiling clove oil in a copper pot. It dulls the ache, she explains, dabbing a bit behind your ear. She's right. The warmth seeps in slowly, like a sleepy tide. A collection of teeth sits in a jar nearby, some blackened, others shattered, none whole. These are not trophies, but records. A grim logbook of past procedures. You wonder what their owners thought as they walked away lighter by one tooth, probably heavier with relief. As the day ends, you're given a simple salve to try on your own mouth, powdered iris root honey, and a touch of natron. For the small aches, the healer says, before they become big. You thank him and slip out quietly. The patient, now bandaged and sipping warm water, raises a hand in tired victory. Later that night, lying on your mat, you press your tongue to your own molars, wondering if any are plotting their revolt. So far, so good. And you whisper, just in case, stay put, or Sekhmet gets involved. You spend the next morning wandering the necropolis, the city of the dead, where silence clings to the walls like a second layer of limestone. Tombs stretch endlessly, in every direction carved with care, painted with love, and filled with the possessions the deceased would need for eternity. Among the gold lapis linen and food offerings, you start to notice something unexpected: smiles. Not just vague Mona Lisa hints, but full toothed, confident, wide grins carved into the faces of the deceased on tomb walls and sarcophagi lids. Even in death, teeth mattered. You trace your fingers along a carved relief of a noblewoman with an elaborate braided wig, arms raised in praise mouth, slightly open to reveal, yes, perfectly etched rows of teeth. A mural beside her shows her holding a chew stick, offering it to the gods like it's sacred incense. You blink. Maybe it is. Egyptians believed that the body needed to be whole to move on into the afterlife. That included hair, fingers, and yes, teeth. That's why embalmers paid such attention to every detail. It wasn't just about looking nice in death, it was about functioning forever. You pass another tomb where a man is shown eating figs and bread, smiling broadly between bites. A life well lived, or a dental propaganda poster. Hard to say. Inside a small chamber, you find a statue of a scribe with a serene, toothy expression. A nearby inscription praises his sweet breath and clear voice. Historians still argue whether this was literal or metaphorical. Did sweet breath mean he actually had good oral hygiene, or was it just a poetic phrase for being polite? Either way, it made the cut for eternity. A scribe near the entrance, who tends to the site and recites daily offerings, tells you about the spell for the mouth. Found in the Book of the Dead, this incantation ensured that the deceased's mouth would open in the afterlife, that they could eat, speak, and breathe among the gods. Sometimes priests even performed a ritual called the opening of the mouth ceremony, using a ceremonial tool to touch the lips and symbolically restore the senses. There was one small hiccup, though. What if you died with a broken tooth? Turns out embalmers had a few solutions. Some remains show artificial teeth inserted post mortem, usually not functional, but aesthetically consistent. A little linen, a dab of resin, maybe even a sliver of ivory, just enough to complete the smile. Think of it as a very early version of dentures, minus the chewing and plus the religious symbolism. You visit the tomb of a middle ranking official named Nebamun. His paintings are famous, vivid, bursting with life, featuring music, dancing, and banquets. And right there in the corner is Nebamun himself, lounging on a stool, holding a goblet, his mouth open in laughter, teeth perfectly white. Well, artistically white. Your guide tells you this wasn't just idealization. It reflected the Egyptian obsession with harmony, mayat balance in all things, including appearance. A clean mouth was not just desirable, it was spiritually aligned, a reflection of inner order. Even funerary amulets sometimes included symbols for freshness or breath. a small stone shaped like a chew stick, or a silver charm with hieroglyphs meaning, "May your mouth speak sweetly before the gods." Later, you pause beside a humble grave marker, less ornate, more weather worn. A simple line of text reads, "He was kind, and his words never stung." You smile, breath and speech, the same ideas. Whether royal or peasant, everyone hoped to be remembered for what they said and how they smelled saying it. You lean against a sun warmed stone and imagine being judged not just by the weight of your heart, but by the freshness of your breath. Sorry, your heart's fine, but garlic. By late afternoon, you head back toward the village, your mind filled with statues, murals, and idealized smiles. You've seen joy, pride, and dignity all painted with the same toothy brush. And though no toothpaste in the world could fight off millennia of decay, it's clear the Egyptians believed oral care was more than survival. It was sacred. By now, you've scrubbed with sticks, dabbed on myrrh, and even witnessed a molar extraction by moonlight. But nothing, absolutely nothing, has prepared you for the raw power of one simple truth about ancient Egypt. Everyone ate onions, and they were not using mouthwash after. You wake to the smell of them fried, pickled, roasted. They're everywhere on morning flatbreads mixed into lentil stews, even chewed raw for breakfast by children running barefoot past your doorway. One boy waves a half eaten red onion at you like it's a prized toy. You wave back, trying not to inhale. You thought burnt eggshell toothpaste was harsh. Try spending your morning in a community of proud, prolific onion enjoyers. The breath hits you like a friendly, aromatic slap. It's no surprise, then, that bad breath or mouth heat, as ancient scrolls politely called it, was a widespread concern. Healers had entire sections of medical texts devoted to it. Remedies included natron rinses, clove chews, licorice, root, and dried and date paste mixed with cinnamon bark. All delicious, all overwhelmed by the omnipresent onion. And it wasn't just onions. Their love affair with beer certainly didn't help. Ancient Egyptian beer was more porridge than pint, a thick yeasty brew made from fermented barley and sometimes flavored with herbs. People drank it at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and likely whenever a tooth ached enough to need dulling. Historians still argue whether the social importance of beer was more nutritional or cultural, but one thing's clear: this wasn't the kind of brew that left you with minty breath. Think warm oatmeal and hops. Now imagine gargling it. Some brave souls tried to fight back. You're invited into the home of a merchant's wife who swears by her triple cleanse. Step 1: chewing dried mint from her rooftop herb garden. Step 2: rinsing with natron and honey water. Step 3: a silence period so the freshness lasts longer. You try her method. It works. Briefly. Then you step outside and get walloped in the face by a breeze full of onion breath from the neighbor's cooking fire. Back to square one. Later that day, you visit a scribe who proudly keeps a journal of oral hygiene habits. He claims to have gone 3 days without offending anyone with his breath, an impressive local record. His secret parsley and a vow of silence during meals. As he hands you a sprig of his beloved herb, you notice he's chewing it quite aggressively. No offense, he says, but most people around here smell like old soup. You nod solemnly. Some remedies involved more creative efforts. You observe one healer preparing a rinse made from lemon juice, cinnamon, date wine, and a sprinkle of salt. For breath as light as lotus petals, he says. You try it. Your mouth immediately puckers. Your eyes water. You may never speak again. Success. Back in the temple district, breath freshening rituals take on a divine edge. Priests burn incense near the mouth before important prayers. One scroll describes an offering made not of food, but of breath of purity, scented with herbs and crushed frankincense. Even statues of gods are fed pleasant smells, oils, perfumes, and smoke to honor them properly. But despite all this effort, ancient Egyptians likely accepted that human breath was, well, human. You see it in their art, no exaggerated avoidance of mouths, no suspiciously distant social interactions. Just people eating, laughing, sharing meals, even onions, with no shame. You stop by a gathering of workers relaxing after hauling bricks to a new tomb site. They're sharing a massive bowl of stew so rich in garlic it could repel mythological beasts. One man tears a chunk of bread, dips it deep, and hands it to you with a grin. You hesitate, then bite. It's spicy, delicious, and instantly breath wrecking. He raises his clay cup in a toast. To stinky smiles, he says. You laugh, coughing slightly. There's no mint strong enough for this crowd, but somehow that's okay. Because in ancient Egypt, a clean mouth was aspirational, yes. But food, good communal flavor packed food, was joy. And a little onion never stopped a good story. You've barely recovered from your onion encounter when you hear a familiar call from the riverside traders have docked. Down by the Nile, boats bob gently against makeshift piers, their hulls laden with sacks, jars, and woven baskets. And among the usual fares, copper tools, dyed cloth, dried fish. You spot something curious. A cluster of clay jars wrapped in reeds, each labeled with symbols you haven't seen before. Imported dental remedies. You wander over, greeted by a jovial trader from the eastern delta who smells like cedar wood and adventure. Come, he says. Smell this powder. It comes from the mountains of Punt. You do. It's pungent, floral, and spicy, like a crushed bouquet left out in the sun. He grins. You rub it on the gums. Clears bad humors, impresses lovers, tempting. He offers you a sampler, frankincense resin, from Arabia clove buds, from the southern Red Sea, and a small cloth pouch of ground cardamom. You try the clove first, just a nibble. It numbs your tongue in seconds. Clove oil, though not understood in modern chemical terms, was clearly prized for its powerful, soothing properties. A neighboring merchant unwraps a bundle of dried twigs from far off Kush, darker, denser, with a sharp herbal bite. Locals crowd around to test them, discussing flavor durability and whether the gods of foreign lands are as picky about breath as theirs. Historians still argue whether Egypt imported these remedies purely for function or whether their exotic origin lent them extra prestige. Like a modern obsession with Scandinavian toothbrushes or Himalayan salt pastes, these products carried mystique. If it came from afar, it must be better. You're handed a drink next, a mild rinse made from Persian mint honey, and crushed date pits. The taste is smoother, almost elegant, with none of the gritty afterburn of natron. It makes your previous brews feel like boot polish in comparison. Some of these products come with elaborate backstories. This bark was chewed by the priestesses of the moon. This powder was buried with a king of Kush. This mint was picked during a thunderstorm, which makes it stronger. You raise a skeptical eyebrow, but the crowd nods solemnly. You purchase a small jar of frankincense and cinnamon paste, swirled with what looks like dried rose petal. The trader says it was made by a widow with a gift for breath, which sounds both mystical and slightly unsettling. The popularity of these imported goods says something about the Egyptians. They were incredibly curious. While they trusted local traditions, they were more than willing to sample foreign cures, especially if they promised cleaner mouths and happier gods. Trade routes didn't just carry gold and papyrus, they brought powders, pastes, and aromatic hope. Back in the village, you set up a small test lab, while a corner of your mat with the new products lined up like soldiers. You try one by one: the clove paste intense, the mint rinse, dreamy, the cinnamon bark, chew stick, delicious, and one mystery blend that tastes like roasted fennel and regret. By evening, your mouth is a cocktail of global ingredients. You could host a dinner party in there, and honestly, you feel fantastic, or at the very least, well seasoned. You talk to a young girl weaving baskets nearby. She points to your rose cinnamon jar and says, "My uncle used that on festival days. Said it made his prayers sweeter." You nod. You like the sound of that. Because in the end, this isn't just about tooth care, it's about identity, belonging, showing up for the gods, and for dinner with the freshest breath you can manage. And if it means importing a little help from Persia Kush or Punt, so be it. You fall asleep that night with clove on your tongue and the faintest trace of rose petal in your breath. Exotic, effective, almost elegant. Just before dawn, you're stirred awake by the gentle jingling of a charm bracelet and the unmistakable sound of someone humming to a cat. You open your eyes to see a woman crouched nearby holding out a small fish to an elegant gold-collared feline. The cat blinks once, sniffs the fish, and flicks its tail in approval. The woman smiles, then carefully drops a small object beside the cat, a child's tooth. Welcome to one of the most quietly whimsical customs. In ancient Egypt, the tooth fairy was a cat. Well, not exactly a fairy, and not exactly just any cat. The deity Bastet, often depicted as a lioness or a domestic cat headed woman, was the guardian of home fertility, and curiously enough, children's transitions, including the loss of baby teeth. The custom varies from village to village, but here's how it generally works. When a child loses a tooth, it's not simply tossed aside. That little enamel pebble is a token, a whisper of growing up, and in ancient Egypt it needed proper handling. Some families toss it into the Nile with a prayer, others bury it under the threshold of the home. But here in this riverside community, they offer it to Bastet. You're invited to join the morning ritual. A young boy, gap toothed and beaming with pride, clutches his freshly loosened tooth. He approaches the small shrine to Bastet, a sun warmed niche in a courtyard wall decorated with shells and painted flowers. He whispers a short verse, then sets the tooth gently into a bowl filled with dried rose petals fish bones and cat fur. No gold coins, no glitter, just quiet reverence and a well fed temple cat purring in the background. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or localized folk tradition, but evidence of tooth related rituals exists in several burial sites, along with charms shaped like cats and inscriptions invoking Bastet's protection for children. One scroll, brittle and faded, mentions the passing of the first tooth as a sign of strength and instructs parents to chant a verse to ensure sweet breath and a strong bite in the years to come. You can't help but smile. Some things really are universal. You ask an elder why Bastet, of all the gods, got the dental gig. She chuckles and says, "Who better cats are graceful, clean, and have all their teeth?" Can't argue with that. The ritual isn't only for children either. Some adults, particularly healers and midwives, carry tiny pouches with shed teeth, sometimes their own, sometimes from patients. For luck, one explains, and to trick the gods into thinking we're still young. You hold one of the pouches, it's soft stitched from linen and rabbit fur smelling faintly of frankincense. Inside a single milk tooth wrapped in reed paper. A charm, a promise, a reminder of the small, strange rituals that knit daily life to the divine. Later in the day, you watch a group of children reenacting the ritual in play. One pretends to be Bastet, wearing a makeshift cat ear headdress, accepting tooth offerings, and blessing the group with gentle tail flicks. You grin. The role comes with power and snacks. Of course, not everyone gets the ritual exactly right. One boy proudly admits he threw his tooth at a crocodile last week to see what would happen. No one's seen that crocodile since, which earns him instant playground fame. You join the group as they end the game with a chant: Bastet, keeper of claws, take this tooth and guard our jaws. Not bad. You might borrow that. As evening falls, the shrine glows in the last light, and the temple cat curls up beside the offering bowl, clearly pleased. Another tiny passage complete, another story added to the long, sleepy scroll of Egyptian dental lore. And maybe, just maybe, Bastet's purring tonight because she knows the truth. Even gods appreciate a good smile. Dusk drapes itself over the ancient village like a gentle shroud, and you find yourself near the banks of the Nile once more. The day's long journey from dusty chew sticks and gritty pastes to palace rituals and whispered tooth fairy legends has built into you a kind of tired reverence for every tooth and every ancient remedy. Now the time has come for a final rinse, a ceremonial close to your day of dental discovery. Standing at the water's edge, you collect a bowl and scoop a mixture of natron and water. The cool liquid ripples reminding you of all the previous blends you've sipped and swished. With a deep inhalation, you dip your fingers into the bowl and then your mouth, letting the solution drift over your gums and teeth like a mild rain of minerals. The taste is sharp and slightly bitter, but it leaves a lingering sense of ritualistic cleansing that transcends the physical act of brushing. You can almost feel the weight of 3,000 years of oral effort, the hum of temple healers, the laughter of children at their makeshift tooth rituals, and the silent, studious debates among scribes over the mysterious power of a paste made from burnt eggshells. As you rinse, you remember the palace halls where golden tools and delicate fragrances danced with divine expectations, and the bustling markets where exotic powders and imported resins sparked lively conversations among traders and villagers alike. The memory of that molar extraction, done with no anesthetic, but with the steady cadence of well practiced incantations, still lingers in your mind like a half remembered dream. Historians still argue whether the combination of honey copper and freshly ground ash truly healed or simply numbed the pain. But here, in the gentle murmur of the Nile, answers seem as fluid and elusive as the water itself. Every swallow of the natron rinse takes you further away from the day's turmoil, linking the modern moment with echoes of ancient hope and ingenuity. You recall the playful debates on toothworms with amused skepticism, the quiet pride of children offering their first lost tooth to Bastet, and the meticulous care lavished upon each tooth by those who believed in the power of a clean mouth to secure favor with the gods. Here beneath the forgiving twilight, every element, the water, the natron, even the soft ripples along the river's surface, merges into a final meditation on humanity's timeless quest for purity. You close your eyes, letting the subtle current of the Nile envelope you. In that stillness, you accept that every drop of natron and every breath drawn at this ancient water's edge is a connection to a long chain of rituals, remedies, and resilient hope. You feel the day's stories receding gently into the cool night air, leaving behind only a quiet sense of fulfillment and the realization that even the simplest rinse carries with it an entire legacy of humanity's efforts to care for itself. The Nile flows softly, its ancient current lulling your senses as you relax into the gentle embrace of dusk. The day's adventures melt away with each slow, measured sip of your final rinse, a simple yet profound act that ties you to countless souls long past who scrupulously cared for their teeth with a mix of ritual and necessity. In the quiet, every sound is amplified: the murmur of the water, the soft rustling of palm fronds, and even your own slow, contented breathing. As you let the cool natron water calm your mouth, the world seems to pause, giving you a moment to simply exist, to appreciate the oddly comforting tapestry of traditions woven over millennia. You feel a deep kinship with those ancient healers, the traders with their exotic powders, and even the playful children invoking Bastet's blessing. All are connected through an enduring human desire for cleanliness, care, and a little hope that even a simple smile can bridge the gap between the ordinary and the divine. Now, as the night deepens and the first stars shimmer above you, let go of the day's complexities. Each memory washes gently over you, like soft whispers of antiquity drifting by on a warm Nile breeze. Here in this hushed moment, you are at peace, buoyed by the timeless rhythm of life, the simple wisdom of shared rituals, and the persistent beauty of human ingenuity. Let your thoughts slow, let your worries fade, and allow yourself to drift into a serene sleep, cradled by history and the quiet promise of a new dawn.